my name is Colin Boyd Shafer, and I would put maple syrup in my immigrant jam.
Oh my goodness. Oh my God. Sorry. We're going to Canada, everybody. Welcome back to Immigrant Jam, the podcast. I'm your host, Lucie. What a beautiful day. A special episode today because we're on Zoom. Yes, this guest, we could not wait for him to come to New York City. We had to have him on the podcast now. This man is amazing, extraordinary, delicious, and nutritious. Colin Boyd Shafer, a Canadian documentary photographer, an arts educator. Yes, very fancy. His work has been featured in National Geographic, The Wall Street Journal. Ever heard of it, people? Come on. And more importantly, he has just published a beautiful, gorgeous, amazing new book called Finding American, which we will talk about now. Stories of immigration from all 50 states. It's really epic and beautiful. And I can't wait to get into it. Welcome, Mr. Colin Boyd Shafer.
Thank you. That is the most enthusiastic intro I've ever had.
Good. That's what I want my legacy to be. This is so exciting. I'm so excited to talk about this beautiful book. You are Canadian. You're in Canada. Where are you in Canada right now?
I am in Waterloo, Ontario, which is about 1 hour from Toronto.
And is that where you're from?
I'm from Kitchener, which is actually the neighboring city to Waterloo. And this is, oddly, I'm back living where I'm from. My mom immigrated to Canada from England. My grandpa was looking in the newspaper for jobs, and they knew they didn't want to move anywhere connected to Britain because that's where they were from England. And so in the newspaper, they saw a job in Colombia, and he applied to be an educator and go to Colombia. And when he got the acceptance letter returned to him, it said British Columbia, Canada. And so
I was just going to ask when you said Colombia, I was like, the country or?
Yeah, it was a boo-boo. Obviously didn't know the spelling of Columbia versus British Columbia, but yeah, for whatever reason, he ended up just being like, you know what, let's take the job. And then they ended up being relocated for the job to Toronto, and then that's how that happened.
Wow.
And then my mom went to Chicago and met my dad, and so my dad's from Ohio, and
well, it's not his fault. Nobody's perfect.
Yeah, we know. So yeah, that's how that happened.
That's amazing. That's like that story that came out last year at some point about this guy who booked a flight to Sydney and he thought he was flying to Australia, but it was like Sydney, Alabama or something like that. And he was like, I was wondering why the flight was only 2 hours.
Fast plane.
Yeah, exactly. But did you sort of grow up with this like awareness of your immigrant background? Did you were you interested in that growing up, or did that come later on in life?
Yeah, I think, and that's kind of an important note in regards to why I would pursue, big photo projects that are connected to immigration. I think like as a white guy in Canada, I was never like, no one asked me questions like you're asking me right now. So it was just kind of like, yeah, I'm just a Canadian guy who, has the added benefit of traveling to Ohio once a year to see family. And like the UK connection was like, I had no one really to visit there. So I think I didn't in the same way that because I'm from a place where it's quite multicultural. My high school was, a melting pot, as they'd say in the U.S., or a mosaic, as we'd say here. and a lot
Okay,
of,
okay. You don't have to
yeah.
brag that you guys are more poetic than us.
But so there's a lot of different people from a lot of different places, and being there really opened my eyes to just the concept um, of migration.
Hmm.
And I think if I didn't go to the high school I went to, shout out Eastwood Collegiate. Um, yeah, I don't think I would have had the same level of interest because, like, in comparison, and I do touch on this in the end note of the book.
Hmm.
In comparison, I had Germantown, Ohio, where I would go see my cousins, and that's like just an incredibly white small town
Hmm.
in the United States, and different places.
Because before this book, you also had done a project called Interlove, right? About interfaith love stories, which, is obviously not necessary. It's not about immigration, but maybe there is also a connection there, but it kind of is about diversity and this like cross cultural, cross religious tapestry of people that we exist among that gets erased in so many sort of political discussions, right? And so I guess that you were always sort of fascinated by it in a way. Is that right?
Yeah. And doing that project stems from a previous project, so many projects, where I photographed someone from every country of the world that had moved to Toronto.
Mm,
And so that was like, I would say that kickstarted it. And then while I was doing that, I was like, I don't think anyone's ever, done a portrait series that told the stories of people who are in interfaith relationships. Because so often when I would say, I'm doing a project on interfaith relationships, they'd be like, "Oh yeah, like I know someone who's in an interracial relationship." It's like, no,
mm,
like I'm talking about belief systems, right? Two different belief systems,
right.
what it's like to, to love each other. So yeah, there's definitely they all connect in some way. And in a few instances, I've had people participate in multiple projects.
The end of the book, you talk about sort of like the origin of this book, at least in 2016, listening to Trump. And I had the same experience where I was sitting at home listening to all the rhetoric and then started the show that this podcast is based on. So I started a live show called Immigrant. I think that the book is so amazing because it really sort of does an amazing job uh showing the like vastness of the stories. There's so many, and I feel like you could have like 5 or 6 or 10 or 20 more books, and I think it's great that you packed as many stories in here as you did. Are there some that like stand out for you, or that you know that sort of are symbolic to you of the things that you wanted to kind of convey in the book?
Yeah, it's funny you say that about many, many books because that is like as this thing comes out into the world, um, it's a little bit of a heavy weight in the sense that I'm aware of how complex each person's story is,
Right.
and how it's so hard to tell only a bit of it, because I think there's, I don't know how many, I actually don't even know exactly how many people I met. But in regards to like what you said about the vastness, I think that, and how many stories there are, I think having so many people involved really shows shows that complexity.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not each person is telling that full story that they have, but they're part of this greater thing.
Mm.
And I don't think there's ever been, I don't know if anyone's ever spent the amount of time I spent collecting stories in this way. I mean, keep in mind, I was in a small little Prius with my fiance, who's now my wife, traveling 50,000 miles over, 3 years, a year on the road.
Mm.
Um, so that part, I mean, that's challenging. Forget any of the interviews or photography, just spending that amount of time. We were couch surfing, so
Mm,
sleeping on strangers' couches across America. Um, that's taxing. But then, yeah, I mean, the actual process, I do think, like, I would never say that I am, I would never claim to be the best photographer on planet Earth. Um, but I think my like strongest skill set is in that kind of that. Yeah, I mean, maybe it's patience or just I think I'm a good listener when it comes down to doing these types of personal, sharing portrait sessions. Um, and I think I'm good at making someone feel like they're a participant in. I mean, not feel, but they are a participant in that it's a collaboration. We're working together on something. Um, so I'm always thinking about that stuff. But I don't know. I think the difference, these days we can all take nice photos. Um, but there's something special, and this is what I would say to a photography student. There's something special about um, having a plan and following through with that plan for a very long time, and giving that thing a lot of effort. And
mm,
so, with the projects I do, they're generally longer term and involve a lot. So when you're doing this, you don't want someone to have to make a decision on the fly.
mm,
Like sharing stuff that's this personal is something you want to do consciously and with like
mm-hmm,
that intention. So the people that I met, usually we'd connected, months and months before,
mm-hmm,
and had many conversations, right? And I already knew a lot about them, so I knew what questions to ask, that type of thing. And I can think of, three examples. There's Ernie,
mm-hmm.
who was in Arizona, and he just I recorded 7.5 hours of interview with Ernie,
Wow. Oh my
which
God.
for his family, um, I'm so glad I did, because it's amazing for them to have that, even though in the book, it's 2 pages or 3 pages or whatever.
Mm,
And just learning from someone who, had lived through, I mean, he escaped the Holocaust, came to the US, ended up becoming the valedictorian. I mean, it really is like a classic success story, becoming a world-renowned hematologist, and just that legacy of like then having, children and grandchildren that are going on to do awesome things in the country. It was really special. And he also was the type of guy that had a lot of artifacts.
mm-hmm,
So, like around his apartment, he'd have like a model train that was the train like they fled Germany on, or
mm,
like he'd have the ship, like he had I don't know what you call it, like a model of the ship
mm-hmm,
that they crossed the ocean on. Like, so there was a lot of things to have conversations about.
mm.
Um, and then uh, Nusrat, who's
Yeah,
in
I wrote down Nusrat too. She's
yeah, in
really struck me
Maryland.
too.
Um,
From Iran, right?
yeah, and there's a lot of layers to that story, but I think
Mm,
that's a classic story of like questions and regret. Because
mm,
I mean, she moved to the U.S., was in a pretty good situation, but moved to the U.S. to like an abusive husband and an abusive family that the husband was a part of. Um, but then like still managed to become like a leader in her community in a way, like she was leading religious services in a way that a woman doesn't usually lead religious services in her background and culture. And she is the descendant of people who had led religious services, but they were all
mm,
men. Um, and then the added layer of that is that her daughter Yvonne was really a champion of this project and someone that I grew close to as a friend. Um, and Yvonne died of COVID, and left her two daughters behind, who are like in the book holding their like family album, um, and it's a lot. So it's like, I guess to take this further, when you do projects like this, it's different than being a photojournalist who's like diving into a place and like capturing some images and getting out. Like I do feel personally connected to everyone in this book. Some people have kept in good touch. Other people, I never heard from again. And that's fine. Either way, everyone's got like their different levels of involvement. But it is like, it's personal. I care about the people in these stories, and like the story continues, right?
Mm,
So, and that's why Nusrat and Yvonne, like, there's that added layer of like, oh my gosh, like it's only been a few years,
mm,
and so much has happened. This is an important point that I would love to drive home, is that right from the get-go, like being self-aware and having done projects before, I knew that this was an epic journey,
mm,
but I also didn't want that to be the focus of this. But I really wanted the book to be about the people in it and not
mm,
Colin's journey of self-discovery. Like if you were just to think of like mentally, how many countries did I actually visit to do this?
right.
Aside from like actual formal borders, it's like the United States is many, many countries,
Mm-hmm.
And so the experiences of people, and that's why it's important not to like conflate like oh, I'm an immigrant, oh, I'm an immigrant, like we're the same. That's like, no, like whether like all of that, all of those intersecting things matter to the experience of an immigrant. So obviously I can like, what's your ethnicity, what's your religion, what's your gender, how much money you have, what's the
Right.
education of your parents.
Age.
And
Yeah.
so it makes me think of Laura, who I met in Delaware, and her story of being from Honduras and being the daughter of well-off like doctor parents, coming to the US, growing up with this like idea of people who were being dubbed as illegal, or and always having a negative view of how they're doing it. Whereas as she's grown older and worked with the immigrant community, starting to see like, oh wait, like the way that we did it isn't available to those other
Mm,
people.
right.
And so that viewpoint that I had was flawed, because it was assuming that everybody had the same options that my parents did.
Right. Right. Right.
And also just like to realize the contributions of all, the people. And that's not like, that doesn't make someone, like I think of people who haven't immigrated anywhere, no one's ever asking them like what they've contributed to society.
Right.
Whereas
So
once someone
true.
immigrates, it's like, there's like this idea that they have to contribute,
Right. Right.
which inevitably they do, but that shouldn't be a requirement for worth and value and care and love and all that
Well,
stuff.
yeah. And then, a lot of the times they're kept illegal because of the contributions they make, and because their illegal status then allows the government to exploit their contributions. So yeah, that's definitely a very interesting point, and so true that that if you're born somewhere, it kind of gives you this royalty, this stamp of royalty that you don't have to contribute anything.
People might come to this book thinking that it'll be organized by state, and that's definitely not the case, which was important to me, because I think you would then be telling truths that aren't true. Like
Mm-hmm.
no two people can represent, a state.
Right. I mean, and that goes back to the whole point, which I'm so happy about, the introduction that you have, the foreword that you have in the book, that basically I talk about this so much on the podcast. I'm a big advocate of this like nation fluidity, or the fact that, or the fact that migration is the most natural thing that humans have done as long as we've existed, right? and this artificial concept of, borders, basically.
And so many people that I met have already changed the state that they're in, since
Right.
I met them. I think in regards to like immigration stories, I mean, one thing I really want this book to do, which is not an easy ask, but I don't just want immigrants, picking up this book. I mean, my
Right.
hope is that people who are, white Americans, like my family, to pick up the book and then feel a connection to the people in the pages because their ancestors migrated at some recent point.
Mm,
Um, and and that's, it's a strange thing, right? It's a strange thing how generational we are. Like we have such a short-term memory
mm,
um, in regards to our ancestral history. So when I did Cosmopolis Toronto, um, I was just like, I have a personal connection to this through the Shafer side of my family. Um, my grandma, the Boyd side of my family, she, was a British woman living in Toronto, and I kept asking her, like, Grandma, are you going to be the participant that I photograph for the United Kingdom for my project? And it took a long time, and finally she's like, yeah.
mm,
So when I did that, I got to ask her the same questions I was asking people who was in the book. And doing that, asking her about her memories of migrating, and what places, where does she feel most at home, and what thing connects her most to her past. Those questions aren't natural to ask your family members.
mm-hmm,
Like we don't do that.
mm-hmm,
And like that's the thing that I hope, is that people who are immigrants, younger generation, I think, it's very easy to just not do that. To instead just ask questions like, what movie are you going to go see this week, or what are we having for dinner, or and just to actually formally say, I'm going to record you,
mm,
and I'm going to ask you some questions, and I need to think of what questions I'm going to ask. That is a powerful act of like preserving, of understanding, of connection, of, and it's important for any family or any friendship. And so I know more about some of these people than I know about some of my friends,
right.
in that deep way, right? Like in that deep sense. Like there were a lot of tears shed.
Mm,
Um, and it's not because I'm asking necessarily like emotionally triggering questions. It's just that I'm asking questions that make people reflect and answer uh, things that maybe no one's ever asked them
mm,
before. I hope that inspires. Yeah, I hope it inspires people to, in regards to immigration, to have those conversations. I know not everyone wants to, do epic. If someone was saying I can't do that because, like, there's literally no reason, because we all have phones, we have the ability to take pictures, record audio, and then traveling, I slept on people's couches for free.
well, there's so much more that I could ask you and talk about, but we don't have all day. And I do want to play the poll questionnaire with you. Okay, so Colin Boyd Shafer of
I'm nervous.
Kitchener,
I'm from
Canada,
Kitchener. Yep.
by way of the United Kingdom, by way of Ohio, by way of the 50 states of America, and this beautiful, epic book. Are you ready, truly, to play the poll questionnaire?
75%. Yes.
Perfect. That's all we
Let's
need.
do it.
If you were president of the United States of America, what American food would you ban?
This is heavy. I'm gonna
I know.
go, and I got a little backstory, but I'm gonna go with grits.
Ooh, okay.
Um,
Interesting. Do
the reason
tell.
why I'm gonna say grits is because I have
You're
a very
lactose
health
intolerant.
no, I have a very health conscious mother,
Yeah.
and we I don't even remember why we were there, what we were doing. We were in the US, and we went to a Waffle House, and my mom really wanted oatmeal,
Mm.
And I mean, you have to know my mom. She literally like eats seeds.
That's my
Yeah,
mom too, by the way.
yeah. Like she
Exactly.
just
Yeah.
eats seeds. I'm like, Mom, like you need more food. And she's like, No, I'm good. Like
Yeah.
I'm full. I'm like, Mom, you just had seeds. So, anyways, we're at Waffle House, and she asked them like, "Do you have any oatmeal?" And there's like, "No." And then, like, I was like, "Do you have anything like oatmeal?" And they're like grits. So she gets grits, and it's just like I don't fully understand what grits is, but it was whatever grits is, and then like a layer of butter. Maybe I'm not even. What I'm banning is not even grits. Maybe I don't even know what grits. Yeah, and so I just remember her face when she received the grits, and yeah, I don't think she ate it, but this is like another funny part about just America is like every place you go to, either at the base level, they have like some fast food restaurant that they're proud of and want you to try,
Right.
and then at a more specific level, it's like fried chicken. Like someone would be like this place's fried chicken is like the best fried chicken. And so every place we were arriving to, someone's saying like, you got to go have this fried. And so we just ended up like every state. It's like, and was anyone's fried chicken better than the other? Probably not, but it was all very good.
I remember when we moved here and my mom would send me to school with my lunch would be like a yogurt and like a dark bread with like, whatever, like a little bit of something on it, and it was the 90s and nobody ate yogurt. That was like so weird. People were like, ew, what is that? And everybody had spray cheese and Lunchables and all this like cool stuff. And I was like, I want that. And my mom would not have it. But I think that's such a theme with immigrants and immigrant kids, the food and the healthy food versus the junk food that you get in America. And yeah, that's why I always ask that question, because the food here is pretty crazy, I think, to immigrants especially. If you could add one face to Mount Rushmore, whose face would you add?
Sophia in Arkansas. Sophia started her own mosque out of a church. like like she was working at the church, and then I don't know if you remember the story, but she was working at the church. She leads like their interfaith stuff, and she, from being at that church, had the space to start planning her own mosque, and then opened her own mosque in Little Rock, Arkansas. And like there were quite a few people in the book where you're like, wow, like you've done a lot. So I don't know. I would add her face, or maybe Wilmot, who is the mayor of Helena, Montana.
Hmm.
And he's like the first black mayor in Montana slash the first refugee mayor. And it's just like, wow, like wow, you've done a lot.
Yeah, fucking
So yeah,
Arnold
there
Schwarzenegger Netflix documentary.
like
We want a
yeah,
documentary about him.
yeah, no, that's so true. And like I think in line with the book is that the thing that I saw happening was that there's the only stories we're hearing are either of heroes, the people that are like, wow, like you did this, that's amazing, or people who like did something horrible and you're like, that's horrible. But it's
Hmm.
like all these people in the middle, and like
Mm-hmm.
so often, and I feel like this is just as you get older and you learn about all the people that we held up as saints or like
Mm.
superstars or like
Mm-hmm.
idols, all
Oh
these
my
things, it's like
God.
it
Yes.
all crashes to the ground, right?
Yes,
And
yes,
so
yes, yes.
instead, like,
My new theory is that the it factor that they talk about, you have to have it to make it, is that you're a narcissistic psychopath piece of shit. That's sort of what you learn the older you get, especially in the entertainment industry, or, when you look at all these people, like you said, that we worship the wrong people.
so it's like the average person,
Right.
who's never got their face on anything except for maybe, a page in Finding American.
Mm,
Um, but just that person who's just like taking care of their community, their family, just being a good person.
mm,
Uh, uh, um, and they're the ones who, deserve their face on
yeah.
Mount whatever.
Okay, two more questions. If you had to come up with a catchphrase for the United States of America, what would it be?
Faith, football, and spray cheese.
Ooh, I love that. Faith, football, and spray cheese.
I feel like
Amazing.
that would be a t-shirt that would sell.
Yeah, absolutely. America, faith, football, and spray cheese.
Yeah.
Shafer 2024. Um, okay, last question, Colin. And this is a really serious one for me. So I would appreciate if you would put, at least a little bit
A
of
little
thought
extra
to this
effort,
one.
a little extra spray cheese on it. Sure.
Yeah, exactly. Do you by any chance know how I can meet David Hasselhoff?
I know that he was really big in Germany.
Right,
So
which is where I'm from.
right. So that's the first place that I would
Okay.
go. I would then go undercover as the
Ooh.
German Chancellor.
Oh,
Because
Merkel
he's
or
not
the current German Chancellor, Scholz?
yeah, whatever. I don't,
Okay, doesn't
you know,
matter.
you could be like assistant to German Chancellor.
Okay, got it.
Um, so you go undercover, like he doesn't keep up to date with politics. So he's
Yeah.
not, he knows he's famous in Germany, but he doesn't know who the current, so
Yeah.
then you send him, his press person. You got to like, obviously you got to fake this.
Mhm.
And obviously you got to get AI to write it, but it's a
Okay.
long letter that basically is giving him not only a day, but like a full week. That
Mm.
is like the Hoff week.
Wow.
And but in order to receive his award, he has to come to
My
your
address?
your address, and
Wow.
that's how you're going to meet him.
Okay. We should have been talking about this for an hour. That's the best answer I've ever gotten to that question. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that and keep everyone posted. But for now, Colin Boyd Shafer, is there anything you would like to say to the people of Immigrant Jam podcast world?
I mean, I hope that they and their friends can check the book out, because by checking the book out, you are engaging with these stories that I think are important.
And where can people find it? They can order it online. Just is it going to be in all bookstores, Barnes and
Yeah, so
Noble?
October 31st is the date that it's in all bookstores across America, and you can order it at your local bookstore.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, support. Don't
Next to
don't
the
don't eat the
fried
don't
chicken
eat the
place.
fast food. Eat the local mom and pop food. It's a small little piece of American history captured, in the 304 pages that it is.
Yes, please, 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 everybody go and get a copy of Finding American. It's beautiful. And, it's what's great about, I think, the size of it is that it is something that can accompany you for a long time. You can have it and you can flip through it. You can obviously read it from cover to cover, but you can also kind of dive into it, dip into it, kind of see where it takes you. And I think that's really beautiful about this book. I guess it's considered a coffee table book.
Yeah, or tea, coffee or tea. I'm a coffee drinker
Or a
myself.
matcha latte table book. Okay. Go out there, look for it. It's beautiful. The foreword is so beautiful and expresses so much that I talk about on this podcast. And then at the end of the book, there's a note from Colin. Well, there's a note from you at the beginning of the book, but
There's a
another
few notes.
longer one at the end of the book that kind of gives more context into how it came to be. And it's beautifully made. And yeah, it's as rich as the stories of immigration in our country, or in the
And
world.
Hasselhoff.
And Hasselhoff, exactly. All hail the Hoff. And if people want to find you, are you on social media, or do you not do that? Or do people find you through your website? Where can people find you if they want to reach out to you?
Find me at Colin Boyd Shafer. There's also at Finding American on Facebook or Instagram.
Thank you so, so much for being on this podcast. Thank you so, so much for making this book. It's beautiful. And I think it's very important. So I hope that lots of people go out and buy it and look at it and love it and enjoy it. And thank you to our patrons. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You know who you are. We love you so much. Thank you for listening. Colin Boyd Shafer, thank you for being here. Yes, this was great. And we'll see you guys soon. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.